She built their empire brick by brick, only to be erased by the man she loved most. But Bianca Caldwell isn't just a betrayed wife. She's the storm he never saw coming. The rain tapped lightly against the windshield, barely audible over the voice message playing from my phone. My mother's voice, calm and calculated, filled the car. We need to keep Christine compliant. She can't find out about the trust fund. Shanice sat in the passenger seat, frozen. Her wide eyes met mine. You serious? Dead. She exhaled sharply, her voice low. Damn, this is a whole soap opera. No, I replied, the tightness in my chest melting into resolve. It's a crime scene. Inside the boutique, Lindsay was laughing, her voice fake and carefree as she chatted with a customer. She flipped her honey blonde hair over her shoulder like she hadn't stolen my husband, like she wasn't living off money funneled from my mortgage. I stared through the window, not blinking. You're going through with it? Shanice asked again. I nodded. Every last step. Over the next 3 weeks, I kept up the charade. Family dinners, morning texts to King. I even faked a couple's therapy session, listening to him ramble about how hard it was to be misunderstood. He reached for my hand. You're so strong, he said. Most women would have left. I smiled. I'm not most women. Behind the scenes, Enzo worked overtime. My old college friend turned forensic accountant was more than eager to help. Bank transfers, forged signatures, a shell company in King's name that funneled money into Lindsay's boutique. He sent screenshots, charts, and flagged transactions. Want? To press charges? He asked one night. Not yet. I want to make it public first. Messy, he warned. Good. I planned everything. The restaurant, the staff, even the videographer, disguised as a birthday montage creator. I recruited Enzo to serve the papers. Shanice agreed to play the calm observer. The night before, I stared at the envelope with King's name on it. No tears, no hesitation. Just a quiet, steady heartbeat. I chose a black dress, not for mourning, but for power. Red lipstick, simple gold earrings. I wanted to look like a woman in control. The restaurant glowed with candlelight and false warmth. My family arrived right on time. King kissed my cheek. Lindsay hugged me. Cynthia, my mother, handed me a gift bag. You look beautiful, she said. Thanks. I feel reborn. We sat, toasted, laughed. King stood to make a speech. To Christine, he said, a woman of grace, of forgiveness, of strength. The clinking of glasses echoed. I leaned toward the nearest waiter, Enzo. We're ready. He stepped forward. King, Walsh, he said loudly. The room quieted. You've been served. He handed over the envelope. King blinked, confused. What the hell is this? I stood. Divorce papers, fraud allegations, and a full list of charges. Gasps. Lindsay dropped her fork. What? Sit down, I said. Cynthia stood. Christine, what are you doing? Exposing the truth. The videographer hit play. The projector lit up. Hotel security footage. King and Lindsay. Holding hands, elevator kisses, emails, bank transfers. Then, my mother's voice. The trust fund confession. Turn that off, Cynthia shrieked. We're just getting started, I said. I turned to Delilah, my cousin. You lied to my face, she stammered. I didn't know. You did. To my father. You let it happen. He looked down. I slid another envelope across the table. What's this? He asked. Your DNA results. You're not my biological father. Silence. Surprise, I said. That's what happens when you lie for a living. The truth finds its way out, Lindsay sobbed. King muttered, flipping through the papers like speed would change the outcome. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious. You'll be lucky if you get to keep your toothbrush. He stood. You don't get to do this to me. You did it to yourself, Lindsay whispered. Christine, please don't. Save it. Cynthia pointed. At Shanice. And you? Shanice took a sip of wine. I helped her survive. Delilah slammed the table. You planned this. Every detail, I said. Even the seating chart. Spencer tried to speak. I shut him down. You knew. You said nothing. Sit down and shut up. The projector flipped to the final slide. $60,000 from our equity account into Lindsay's boutique. I looked at her. You owe me 60 grand. She shook her head. He said it was a gift. You knew. You just didn't care. Then a man stepped forward. Navy suit, serious face. King Walsh? I'm with the state's Financial Crimes Division. We have questions, Cynthia gasped. You brought the police? Not yet, I said, but they're watching, and they're very interested in your trust fund. Mom, Cynthia paled. You can't touch that. I can. My father tried to speak. I shut him down. You're not even my father. You don't get a vote. Then Shanice stood. Since we're all being honest, Lindsay, I bought the lease to your boutique, including the debts. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Lindsay stood. Her chair fell. You can't do this. You took my life, my money, my family, and you thought I'd just roll over. King stepped forward. Christine, we can fix this. I still love you. You don't even know what love is. He reached for my arm. I stepped back. Touch me again, and I'll add assault to the list. The room was silent. You taught me silence, shame. Now I'm teaching you consequences. I walked out. The door shut behind me. Outside, the air was crisp. I leaned against the brick wall behind the restaurant, pulled out my compact mirror. Red lipstick is still perfect. Eyes clear, hands steady. I smiled. Happy birthday to me? By the time I got home, my phone was blowing up. Missed calls, texts, emails. I didn't answer any of them. Shanice flopped on the couch. Girl, it's already online. Someone leaked the footage. I took a sip of wine. Good. Let them talk. The next morning, headlines exploded. Local boutique owner tied to scandal Lindsay's face was front and center. King's name is bolded. Everyone who mattered would know. An email from Enzo. Subject, trust fund. Final nails. It had everything. Transfers from the trust to a secret investment account. King is listed as a silent partner. Fraud, plain and simple. Forwarded it to my lawyer. Her reply. This is enough to freeze the fund and open a civil suit. Are you ready? My answer. Light the match. By noon, legal motions were in place. The trust was frozen. King's accounts were flagged. Cynthia was under investigation for financial manipulation. Lindsay's boutique was locked by evening. A note on the door, new management underway. Social media exploded. Former friends took sides. Strangers applauded. I didn't care about applause. I cared about the truth. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a judge. Calm, focused. I presented everything. Paper. Trails, voice recordings, witness statements. My lawyer called it bulletproof. King looked tired. Lindsay looked empty. Cynthia didn't even show. When the judge ruled in my favor, I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just nodded. Justice wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, final. That night, I walked to the beach alone. The sky was clear. The wind is soft. I sat on the sand and whispered to myself, this is not revenge. This is reclamation. Then I stood and walked forward, into my life, into my peace, into my power. The morning after his world had crumbled, James sat alone in his small, rented apartment in downtown Chicago. The apartment, once a temporary haven from the high-flying corporate world he had ruled, now felt like a tomb. Photographs of happier times, his wedding with Rachel, company events with Morgan smiling at his side, and even a picture of them all celebrating the company's IPO, glared at him from the walls like silent witnesses of a grand betrayal. His phone buzzed again. Another reporter, another investor, another so-called friend. James turned it off. Silence was better. He hadn't left the apartment in 3 days. His inbox had flooded with legal notices. His name was being dragged through the mud in every media outlet. Morgan had initiated a character assassination campaign, branding James as a reckless executive whose mismanagement had nearly cost the company its future. Rachel had filed for divorce through a cold, professionally worded email. Attached were copies of her lawyer's demands. Betrayed, abandoned, isolated, but not broken. James wiped his tears and stood up. The man in the mirror was hollow, yes, but beneath the anguish, a flicker of determination sparked. He had built an empire once. He could fight for what was rightfully his, and he would start by exposing the truth. He began by contacting a former ally, Elena Ward, a former compliance officer who had resigned a year before due to Morgan's unethical practices. Elena had always warned him about Morgan's machinations, but James had brushed them off, thinking Morgan was too loyal to betray him. Elena met James at a quiet coffee shop far from the city center. "You were a fool, James," she said bluntly, sipping her latte. "But you're not the first man to be blinded by trust." James nodded. "I need your help. I need evidence." Elena glanced around cautiously and slid a USB drive across the table. "Start here. It's not everything, but it's a trail. Financial discrepancies, shell companies, side deals Morgan made using company funds, enough to raise serious questions if you know where to look." James closed his fingers around the drive. "Why are you helping me?" Elena gave a bitter smile. "Because I hate Morgan more than I hate you." Back in his apartment, James dove into the data. What he found made his blood boil. Over the past 2 years, Morgan had rerouted millions through off-the-book contracts to dummy corporations, many linked to Rachel's family holdings. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was deeply financial. Rachel and Morgan had plotted together, likely for years, to seize control and wealth. James hired a forensic accountant, an old college friend named Darren Flynn. Together, they pored over thousands of transactions. Patterns emerged. Invoices that didn't match projects, vendors that didn't exist, employees who had never been on payroll. Morgan had built a criminal empire on top of James's dreams. James knew that going public with the data would be risky. He had no credibility, but there was one person who might listen. Vivian Chen, an investigative journalist known for taking down corrupt corporate giants. She agreed to meet him in a park, wary but curious. "You're asking me to trust a disgraced CEO with a personal vendetta," she said, scanning the files on her tablet. "I'm asking you to follow the money. It won't lie." Vivian was silent for a long time. Finally, she nodded. "If what you're showing me is real, Morgan and your ex-wife are going down." As Vivian began her deep dive, James approached another key player, Liam Norris, the company's former head of security, who had been fired quietly 6 months ago. Liam had once been loyal to James and had seen too much. "I was paid to look the other way," Liam confessed, his voice low. "But I kept copies, insurance. You want them? I want immunity and my job back if this ever turns around." James agreed. The files Liam handed over were explosive. Video surveillance, internal memos, even audio recordings of Morgan discussing the hostile takeover with Rachel and board members. Now, James had enough to bring down an empire. Vivian's exposé dropped like a bomb. Headlines screamed, "CEO Morgan Hale implicated in massive corporate fraud." Subheadlines revealed Rachel's complicity. The article linked to documents, recordings, and anonymous testimonies. The company's board launched an internal investigation. Stocks plummeted. Morgan disappeared from public view. Rachel issued a denial, but emails published in the exposé painted her as a central figure in the conspiracy. And James? For the first time in months, he stood tall. Public opinion began to shift. Media outlets sought his side of the story. Former allies who had deserted him returned with cautious apologies. But James wasn't interested in sympathy. He wanted justice. With his reputation partially restored, James filed a civil lawsuit against Morgan and Rachel, seeking damages and a formal investigation. Government agencies began probing deeper. Depositions, subpoenas, forensic audits, the legal wheels turned slowly, but relentlessly. James, once a pariah, now sat across from Morgan in a deposition room, watching him sweat. "You stole everything from me," James said. Morgan laughed bitterly. You handed it to me. That ends now. Months passed. Morgan was indicted on multiple charges, including wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy. Rachel's assets were frozen pending investigation. Their social empire crumbled. James didn't return to his old company. He had no interest in reliving that past. Instead, he started a new venture, a tech incubator for startups with strong ethical oversight and transparency. He hired Elena, Darren, and even Liam Vivian, won an award for her exposé, crediting James for his courage. In a quiet moment, standing in the sunlight of his new office, James looked at the framed headline on his wall. The man who lost everything and fought back. He smiled. The battle wasn't over, but the war had turned. James stood at the precipice of victory and destruction. The explosive revelations about Elias and Victoria had thrown Wellington Enterprises into chaos, but the war was not yet over. James knew that true redemption would only come through a final, undeniable blow, a reckoning that would echo through the company's legacy for years. The boardroom was tense. The media had caught wind of the internal investigation, and whispers of fraud, betrayal, and cover-ups rippled across financial circles. James walked into the board meeting with Alexandra by his side and a thick dossier under his arm. It was the culmination of months of meticulous planning, investigation, and quiet resilience. He began calmly. Before we proceed with any votes, I need to bring forward the final pieces of evidence that expose the extent of the treachery this company has endured. He passed the documents around. Each board member gasped as they flipped through pages detailing offshore accounts tied to Elias, dummy corporations used to launder money, and personal messages between Victoria and him discussing how to remove James from power and manipulate share prices. An older board member, Agnes Halloway, shook her head. Elias used us all. Victoria was merely a pawn in his deeper corruption. No, James said firmly. She was more than a pawn. She had a choice, and she chose to betray. Elias was summoned to the emergency meeting. For the first time, the smug confidence that once defined him was absent. James stared him down. You siphoned millions. You orchestrated a coup. And you thought the legacy of this company was yours to tarnish? You're done. With Alexandra's help, James played a recorded conversation between Elias and a shell company owner he had turned into a whistleblower. The audio was clear, damning, and irrefutable. By the end of the hour, Elias was stripped of his role, his shares frozen pending legal action, and escorted out of the building. Victoria, who had resigned under public pressure days earlier, had already fled the country. Interpol was alerted. In the weeks that followed, James led a full forensic audit of Wellington Enterprises. Employees, once fearful, began to come forward, with testimonials of how Elias and Victoria's leadership had fostered fear and nepotism. With Alexandra, he restructured leadership, placing trusted, ethical professionals in positions of power. The company slowly began to heal, but James didn't stop there. He launched the Wellington Trust Initiative, a foundation focused on restoring faith in corporate ethics, supporting whistleblowers, and providing education for young professionals about leadership with integrity. He gave speeches at universities, participated in global forums, and became a symbol of corporate redemption. In one particularly emotional event, he was invited back to his alma mater. Alexandra accompanied him. As he stood at the podium in front of hundreds of students, he said, "I lost everything, my position, my reputation, my peace, because I trusted the wrong people. But I regained it all by trusting the right values: truth, resilience, and accountability. Never trade your integrity for power. Never let betrayal define you." The crowd stood in ovation. Later that evening, as he and Alexandra walked through the campus gardens, she turned to him. "You did it, James. Not just for you, for everyone." He nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. "We did it. Together." They paused by a reflecting pool. The water was calm, like the closure he finally felt inside. Years later, Wellington Enterprises would be known not for its scandal, but for its transformation. Elias was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Victoria was extradited and faced charges as well. The company survived and thrived, becoming a model of reform. James retired quietly, choosing to mentor young leaders rather than chase more accolades. Alexandra became CEO, steering the company with brilliance and compassion. Their bond had grown beyond just professional respect. Love, once scorched by betrayal, bloomed again in mutual understanding and shared purpose. On a quiet spring morning, they returned to the company headquarters. A new wing was being inaugurated, the Hall of Integrity. A bronze plaque was unveiled bearing James's name. It read, "In honor of James Halden, who reminded us that trust is the foundation of legacy, and redemption is the most powerful victory of all." Tears welled in James's eyes. The betrayal that once broke him had become the fire that forged a legacy.